Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Field Guys podcast, your home for the greatest sports mind since Alvin Gentry. We are your hosts, Cameron Curran and Max Jensen, and today we are going to be doing a preview of the upcoming fantasy football season. And joining us today, we have fantasy sports writer Chris Robin. Thanks for coming on, Chris. How's it
That's
going?
me. That's me. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
So when did you start writing and getting pretty serious with all this fantasy football stuff?
Well, I would say, as it stands now, I've been with Cheat Sheet for probably about a year now, and then I bounced around. I wrote for Going for Two for a year or so, and just throughout the years, I would say I got pretty serious about it 2 or 3 years ago. But I would go through phases where I would write, and I would do fantasy football stuff, and I would write for a couple of months. Like I would, people would really, like it would pick up steam, let's say, and people would really like it. And then I would just not write anymore because work or something along those lines ever happened. So I always told myself, let's really, hammer this home, let's really be consistent, keep writing, keep, doing podcasts and shows, never say no, always be on time, have manners, and see where it takes you. So, long-winded way to answer your question, on and off for about 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, and this is a full-time job for you?
No, absolutely not. No, I work with mentally impaired adults, coach some Special Olympic stuff, studying behavioral therapy. So I have a career. I have a full-time job elsewhere that pays the bills, and as it stands now, this is it's like a part-time gig, you could say. I am under contract with Cheat Sheet when writing the DFS stuff, and I don't know. I don't think I've ever told you, but I've told a lot of people, on Twitter and social media in general. When this pandemic hit, all the sports went out the window, so there was no DFS. Well, I was able to show my versatility as a writer, let's say, with my seasonal football stuff, my dynasty football stuff, my excuse me, my baseball prospects articles. So I kind of it's no secret that the guys at the site, and Jeremy, the owner of the site, says you carried us through the pandemic. You guys we were getting traffic in, and it was all because of your stuff, let's say. So it's been a wild ride the last 8 or 9 months.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you usually spend a lot of your time making cheat sheets or writing articles, or like what's most of your time spent doing?
Believe it or not, most of my time is spent writing notes and my thoughts down on paper. I find that works the best for me. I know that's a great question because there are so many different, almost, I don't want to be rude, but it's almost the fantasy football community, let's say. It's really oversaturated in terms of like Twitter and just social media in general. And oversaturated, I'm sure means there's just so much of it. And where do you go? Who do I turn to, right? So there's a lot of advice and a lot of thoughts in the process people gives you. Basically, for me, it's my thoughts and my notes. I write so much stuff down. I keep my phone next to my bed like we all do at night, and I'll wake up 2, 3 in the morning, and I'll say, "Hey, Siri," and I'll just like a random thought I had in the middle of the night. So writing everything down on paper is what works for me. So I spend most of my time writing stuff down and then trying to translate my wild man serial killer notes, trying to translate it to, a Word document that people can, understand and read.
So how much research are you doing versus going off of kind of feeling or intuition?
Well, here's the thing. I do DFS stuff, as I've said, like 15 times in the last 10 minutes. But so I do the daily fantasy sports stuff, and then I'm also doing seasonal stuff. So I can answer that question twice. So when it comes to my DFS stuff, I start the night before. Let's say, hockey. I don't know if you guys are hockey fans. You're in Virginia. There's no real hockey around. But let's say hockey, right? The Stanley Cup playoffs are in full swing, full bloom. The slates have locked at noon Eastern my time. So I'll start the night before, 7, 8 o'clock. I'll get my notes done, get everything where I want to be. And then I'll write it in the morning. And then I publish it, 10:30 my time. So when it comes to DFS, just a few hours, half a day maybe. When seasonal stuff is concerned, it's a long, slow process. That's where people say it's the grind. I'm working on, not to shamelessly plug anything, but I'm working on my IDP, individual defensive player, deep dive now. I did 50 of them. I would say in April, the beginning of April. And now that the season is coming closer and closer every day, every minute, we're in the middle of August, I'm digging back in. I'm doing a deeper dive of 100 to 200 players, starting that now. So again, it's like a 3 or 4 month long process. So it depends on what you're doing, what your goal is, seasonal, DFS, it's all different.
Yeah, that's really cool. And one thing I noticed in your Twitter bio that caught my attention is you're a member of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association.
Correct.
So
Yes.
I have no idea what that is. Could you expand on like how you got involved in that and like what that is?
Sure. That was probably the biggest step to me in terms of really let's, as I said a few moments ago, let's hammer this home, let's stick with it, and let's see where it takes you. And getting into the Fantasy Sports Writing Association was huge for me. As I told you guys before we were live, I'm in my mid-30s. Excuse me, I have an undergraduate degree, and I have all these, qualifications. But getting in the FSWA was probably, I would hang that above my bachelor's degree, right? It's so cool, to say that. And to the average Joe at the grocery store, it means nothing. It's worthless. But,
Right.
to someone like me or even you guys, the longer we stay in this thing, it's more fun. And you can go to their website. It's fswa.org, I believe. And it's just like, it's like a community of guys and girls, where you're still writing independently and you send everything there. And they have awards and ceremonies and stuff like that every year. I think I've only been in there since January or February. It wasn't a long, arduous process. It was an application. I had to send, I believe they wanted 5 examples of writing that you did. And that was a fun process. I was able to pick 5 of my most favorite articles at the time, send it in, and it took about 3 or 4 weeks, and I got in, and I was very happy. So more to come. I found there's so many other organizations that you can get involved in. I put in an application to get press box and pass credentials in the NFL and the NHL, but that all went by the wayside when the pandemic hit, because we're talking, the site sent my application in for me, I believe in February, right around the FSWA application, and we never heard back. And that would have been sweet to be sitting in a press box tonight at Comerica Park watching a ball game, chatting with you guys or writing an article. That's a lifelong dream of mine.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be so cool.
So you said you write a lot for DFS and also for the seasonal stuff. When you're playing and actually participating in fantasy sports, do you mainly focus on seasonal or more daily stuff?
Well, as it stands now, I focus on DFS more often than not nowadays. I mean, I love to write seasonal stuff, especially dynasty football stuff or, dynasty baseball stuff. But it's like, I don't want to rub anyone the wrong way. I'm not talking about you two. I'm talking about anybody else that's, in the industry and on Twitter, and social media full time. It's like a lot of these I've seen, and I don't know anybody offhand, so I don't know why anybody would get upset. A lot of these people are one-trick ponies, if that makes any sense. They know dynasty football, and that's it. Where I find it more relevant to be resourceful in numerous topics. Let's say DFS hockey. I write a daily DFS hockey article, a DFS baseball article, I'm big into baseball prospects. I can write. If you were to email me or send me a DM, hey, we need you to write about the Thanksgiving Day parade in a couple months. I would like to think I can do it, because our thoughts and our imaginations are really all we have when it comes to writing and reading and going live on broadcasts with you guys like this. So one of my biggest fears is someone were to call me boring, right? My second biggest fear would be to be, pigeonholed in a one-trick pony in terms of writing. Like, hey, you want to come on my podcast? We'll talk DFS. We'll talk IDP. Oh, well, I don't really know any of that stuff. All I do is write about running backs and wide receivers, So no offense to anybody if it takes it the wrong way. It's just my opinion, I think we're best served in regular everyday life. The more that we know, the more that we're able to, get involved, let's say.
Yeah, definitely. And you've been writing for a while. Do you have like a specific like memory that like you really enjoyed writing about, or like a favorite fantasy memory?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys will get a kick out of this one because when I asked you before we went live, you guys are a lot younger than me. I don't want to say I could be your dad. That would be weird because we got to carry on with the show. But the first time I ever played fantasy football, I just wrote on a yellow pad. Me and my friends got together. We sat around and we just drafted from memory. We're talking like 96, 97. I was in middle school. Lions were playing at the Silver Dome. Barry Sanders was the man, him and Emmitt Smith, Thurman Thomas. And we would just go around the room. When we thought of a guy, oh, I want that guy. There was no order, nothing. And we did the team. I think we each picked 8 players on our team. And then I would be responsible Monday morning to get the Detroit Free Press or the Detroit News and use the box scores to tally up our final score at the end of the week. So nowadays it's nice. Everything it's instant. You're watching a game on Sunday and you hit refresh, and it's up to the second, right? Yeah. So my favorite memory would be that, or even younger than that. I'm talking elementary school. The same group of friends. We're still friends to this day. Been friends 30 years or so. We would write our hot takes, as you guys call it now, or bold predictions. We would each write something on a note card and then give it to one of our moms, and she would hide it from us, and we wouldn't get to see it until end of the season, right? Barry Sanders is going to have 5,000 yards and 75 touchdowns, and we would write the most outlandish, the better. And I believe, forgive me for not grabbing one, I actually have one around in my office down here from 1994 that me and my friends wrote down, and it's awesome. Just things of that nature. It's really fun.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
That's really cool. We should have done.
I have a note card with hot takes older than the both of you.
That's true. That's cool. But yeah, so we wanted to talk some fantasy football in this episode. Give our listeners sort of a little preview. So when you're going about your draft, do you have sort of like a general strategy that you try to go with? Are you targeting maybe more running backs or wide receivers early on, or if you're reaching for, an elite tight end? Do you have sort of like a specific strategy you try to go off of?
Well, yes and no, and that's not really helpful to the question you asked. It's got to go year to year, season to season, like what the landscape is, right? Like this year, it's well known that wide receiver is super deep, so you can wait on wide receiver, let's say. But there's also guys, like they joke, I want to do the 0 running back strategy. I don't recommend that. So in terms of, do I have a strategy when it comes to a draft? I know this might be the ho-hum answer. I have to, every draft is different, right? And I've transitioned more now in my old age where I take what the draft gives me, right? So I don't have a plan going into the draft, right? I have a plan during the draft. I'm a big guy with, setting my queue, being there live, like not auto draft, but setting my queue, let's say, these are I'm up in 4 or 5 picks and these are the next 4 guys I want, but all 4 get drafted right before I pick. Well, my plan is then shot and I'm left holding my hat with 2 minutes on the clock, 5 minutes on the clock. So I just put a general idea of first, after I pick, I instantly think, well, where do I want to go with my next pick in terms of my roster configuration, right? Well, if I just went running back with my first 2 picks, let's see what happens in my 3rd round pick. Did a stud running back fall to me in my 3rd overall pick? Then that's what I'll draft. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into saying like a rigid plan where I'm going running back with my first 2 picks, then wide receiver. And then when all those guys are drafted, I'm, oh my God, I'm going to draft a tight end in the 2nd round out of like a panic selection,
Right.
if that makes any sense. So I guess to answer your question, yes and no. I take what the draft gives me now, if that makes any sense. And I kind of laid out why, given if guys are draft. So
you said you like to do a lot of daily fantasy sports stuff too. So
yes.
I guess to reconfigure the question to fit the daily stuff, would you focus more on spending more on, let's say, a running back and then maybe go a little bit cheaper on receiver? Would you maybe spend a lot on getting a player like George Kittle versus maybe waiting, seeing if maybe like Greg Olsen is like really cheap too? So what's your strategy in terms of that?
That's a great question, actually. Thank you for asking. I write an article once a week during the football season called Bottom of the Barrel, where I highlight those really cheap guys because we all know the studs to start. You want to start where you used to want to start, Aaron Rodgers and now CMC and Henry, but you can't build your roster on all those guys. You only have, I think in the NFL on FanDuel at least, you have 60,000 fictitious dollars. So you can't do all that. So in terms of building my rosters on a week-to-week basis in the NFL, it's basic for me. It's mainly matchup based. Like I believe Kittle, since you brought him up, he's always the most expensive tight end possible, him or Kelsey. $7,000, $7,500 range when quarterbacks are in like the 8,000 or 9,000 range. So it's all matchup based to me, but primarily I always, without a doubt, roster 2 stud running backs. Let's say Alvin Kamara and Josh Jacobs. Boom, they're in my lineup, and then I go value wide receiver, if that makes any sense. So it's different week to week. Again, I rarely have a plan when I'm building my DF rosters as a whole. I have a plan like morning of, let's say. So great question. I don't have an answer for that because it's a tough question to answer, if that makes any sense, given the prices are always fluctuating. And I would say to anybody that's trying out NFL DFS for the first time, really, really get into like the matchups. And, we're always going to want to target a bad defense. So do that, fill in your roster that way, and then see how much money you have left. And then, I have $8,000 left and I need a running back. Oh, Zeke Elliott just fell into my lap after I, built my roster the way I wanted to.
Right.
And sort of a tangent. I've been getting into daily fantasy baseball recently.
My favorite.
Yeah, I love it, and I've been doing pretty well.
Max did really well.
Yeah, it was like my second time. I won 1,000. I got first.
Okay.
Like his second game ever. I think I should take a cut of it because I'm the one who got it.
He recommended DraftKings. But my question, so I was basing my roster sort of on matchups. Like I don't know if you know the website Baseball Savant, but I would go to that website and just look at.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah. So is that sort of the approach you take, or are you looking for stud guys like Yelich or Trout?
Well, another great question. This is fantastic. I love having this kind of discussion. So I was just introduced to Baseball Savant through Jeremy, the owner and operator of Cheat Sheet, where I write for now. Before that, I'm big on an optimizer. I feel like in any and all DFS, an optimizer is fantastic, and we have one on the site, which is top notch. And Jeremy, who, sorry to keep dropping his name, but he plays baseball daily. We're talking $500, $800, $1,200 a day. And that's where he makes, that's his full-time job is playing DFS. I know it's like he lives in California. He's got an in-ground pool. It's like a perfect a perfect commercial, or testimonial for baseball DFS.
Yeah.
So he turned me on to Baseball Savant, and little did I know, I was already doing the same things, because on Baseball Savant, as you mentioned, you can hammer home, ISO or BVP or slugging percentage. You can pick your pitcher against how does he do with left-handed bats or right-handed bats. So every day I'm writing a crush spot, and I'm doing a lot of research, and it's all has been based on Savant recently, after getting away from some of the other tools that I've used. So Trout, you're going to want to start him every day. In terms of Gallo, I always start him when he's going against a pitcher who has an exit velocity of like 90, like 0.9 or like 1.0 against left-handed bats, because Gallo was a left-handed bat, and exit velocity is obviously it's how fast it exits the bat, right? So when it comes to guys like Joey Gallo or even Christian Yelich, I double check and I make sure that some of these stats and these numbers are like way in their favor before I roster them. Again, Trout is an extenuating circumstance. He's a stud, best player on the planet. But guys like Gallo, he strikes out a lot. Yelich hasn't had the best start to the season. So guys like that, that's what I do. I look at slugging percentage, exit velocity, and again, the opposing pitcher. If a guy like Michael Fulmer here in Detroit, he's got like a 9 or a 10 ERA. I don't need to look any further. He's not good right now.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. But yeah, I guess going back to fantasy football, is there anyone you're looking at that's sort of like a lock for the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, it's Christian McCaffrey. I'll stop you right there, right?
Yeah, that's
Even
what Max and I have too.
Even in a super flex, obviously super flex, you can start 2 tight end, or excuse me, two quarterbacks. Even then, I'm not even thinking twice about not drafting CMC number 1.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I heard I was kind of a cool idea, whereas someone said if Christian McCaffrey doesn't win MVP like this year or in the next few years, there's never going to be a running back who wins it again.
No.
Because no one's ever done what he's doing. No one's ever going to do what he's doing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a stat that like one of those pop-up graphics that in the middle of a game, even like last season I'm talking about, where they put the graphic of the last few people to win MVP, and it's always a quarterback. It's predominantly it's always a quarterback. And you can't knock what Lamar did last season or what Patrick Mahomes, did in his MVP season. But at what point do you say McCaffrey is, the MVP of the league? He's surely the best player in Carolina. And then you get the guys that argue, well, how can he be an MVP on a losing team that doesn't make the playoffs? And that I never let that cloud my judgment. If you're the best player in football, it doesn't matter what team you're on.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think you rarely see a running back carry a team. And I think Christian McCaffrey gets a lot of not a lot of hate, but he doesn't get enough attention because he's not a quarterback. And I think he's just this anomaly where he's just better than everyone else in the field. And you just see that when you watch it. So
well, here's my thing, if you'll indulge me for a moment. So, Lamar did what he did last season. I don't think he does it again this season. He's one of my, not to skip ahead in what you guys were, what I want to talk about, but Lamar is one of my overvalued players, but it feeds into what I wanted to say. So I don't believe Lamar repeats what he did last season, not to get all coachy on you, but defenses are going to catch up, coaches are going to catch up. Pat Mahomes, he's not slow and steady, but he's a stud. You know what to expect from him. So let's say Christian McCaffrey does what he did last season, which it would be a huge deal.
Impressive.
And he has to be the MVP, right? And I don't care if you have a quarterback who throws 50 touchdowns out of nowhere, this season. McCaffrey has done it 2 seasons in a row, let's say. So I think that qualifies for the old cliche, day in and day out. So
right.
to hurt, I don't want to say hurt, but to just treat McCaffrey like a dog like that would be not good. Not good. It wouldn't be a good look for the NFL, let's say. And I don't care if Matthew Stafford throws 50 touchdowns or Joe Burrow throws 40 touchdowns and rushes for 10 and has 50 total touchdowns. And McCaffrey repeats, he's the consensus MVP.
I think that was spot on.
Yeah.
And you created a pretty good transition for us kind of falling into our sleepers for this year's draft. So if you have can you give us like your top 3 sleepers for this upcoming season?
Absolutely. I'll start my sleepers. A lot has to do with their ADP, obviously, because how can you say Alvin Kamara is a sleeper when he's going 3rd or 4th overall?
Yeah.
Right.
So if you don't mind, I'll start from my lowest to the highest. So my 3rd sleeper is Raheem Mostert in San Francisco this season. His ADP sits at about 50, 51-ish. People were a little bit they were on the bandwagon, and then when he said he wanted to be traded, they hopped off. He signed his contract. They gave him a raise. It was pretty quiet, I would like to say. So, but the talk of Mostert has been, little to known. The dust has settled. So Raheem Mostert in San Francisco. Excuse me, real quick. If you look at his tape, I think he had one of the fastest touchdowns last season. I think that the graphic they showed, he ran like 21 or 23 miles an hour when he went off the edge, hit the sideline, 23 miles an hour. It was absolutely ridiculous. So on tape and numbers wise, it's Mostert. A gut call of mine next would be David Montgomery in Chicago. His ADP is at 40, 41, 42, give or take. I've long been a supporter of him and Miles Sanders in terms of David Montgomery for the sake of what we're doing. I don't think that Chicago knew what they had in him. They didn't really use him right last season. And looking into it, he had like 240 carries or overall touches, 260, 240, something like that. So to say that they didn't know how to use him, 206. Well, he had all that work, and they didn't know how to block for him, what schemes to use him in. So I think he has a fantastic year this season, and that hurts me as a Lions fan in the NFC North here. Yeah. And my number one guy who everybody is on, they already know what he's going to do. It's Kenny G here in Detroit. He's a top 10 guy in terms of wide receiver. His ADP is at 26, and that's about right. I mean, because if you look at the other 20 guys, 25 guys ahead of him, we're talking premier players, stud running backs, stud wide receivers. But to say Kenny G is a sleeper, it's not spicy, it's not juicy. It can be debated and argued. I think he's a sleeper because he's going to finish in the top 5, top 3 in wide receivers this season with Matthew Stafford being back here. And again, I don't want to sound like a homer, because that's a slippery slope. If you get labeled a sleeper, then all your work, all your content, all your broadcasts, they're discounted, because you're like, oh yeah, he's okay, but he's a homer. So all his stuff is nonsense. So I think a lot of people would agree with me that Kenny G's a stud. He is a wide receiver 1, and I believe that he makes his way into the top 5 wide receivers heading into next season.
I could totally see that. I guess I'll give 3, and I'll get your thoughts on him. My first guy is David Johnson. A few years ago, he was like the number 1 guy going in the first round. But then I think that was the year I had the number 1 pick, and I drafted him, and then he got hurt.
Did the same thing. He broke his wrist and was out.
Yeah, but ever since then, he's either been off the field or not to the level he was before. But now I feel like he's on a new team, got a chip on his shoulder. They gave up a lot to get him, so I think he's going to be motivated to really do well. And he really doesn't have too much competition behind him, I don't feel like. I think he's going to get a decent workload. So David Johnson is my first guy. I also got Stephon Diggs, another guy moving teams. I feel like the Bills wouldn't have given him that large contract unless he was going to be like the number one guy. So I feel like he's going to get a lot of opportunities with Allen. I feel like Allen's going to get better. So I got Diggs in there. And then my last guy is a quarterback. Maybe you don't draft him as your number one guy, but more of a backup. I mean, Ryan Tannehill. I mean, he did so good last season in the amount of time that he played. I think if it was like averaged out for a full season, he would have been like a top 5 guy. So I think it's definitely worth taking a flyer on him late for pretty cheap.
Absolutely. So if you wanted my thoughts on each guy, DJ, his ADP is at like 31 or 32. And the only reason I keep bringing up ADP because it's a good measuring stick for, value and your team, right? So if you draft DJ, that's in the 3rd round. So you're not drafting him as your number one quarterback, let's say, if everything goes to plan in your draft or, your prototypical draft. Normally your first round pick is a running back if you're an old school guy, right? Mm-hmm. So DJ at 31 in Houston, that's a fantastic call. I just want to ask you, have you seen the pictures of him on the field? He's posted his own on social media. The guy looks like a monster. He was already big, like a beefcake, but he's cut now. Yeah. And I think you're right. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and I don't want to get in a discussion of what do you want to call it? God and faith and everything. But he is he's a man of faith. I think his faith and the chip on his shoulder, it's a scary combination, and it's going to carry him right where we all think and expect him to be. So in terms of Diggs, he played in Minnesota. We got to see him here in Detroit twice this season. I'm not his biggest fan, but going to Buffalo, that's huge. As you hit it out of the park there, Josh Allen is only going to get better. I don't think we've seen Josh Allen's best season as a professional quarterback, which is awesome because he had a great season last year. Diggs is a good call. His ADP is like 64, so we're talking like 6th, 7th round. That's fantastic value there. Again, the guys that you've named here, you're drafting them, and they're not going to kill your team if they don't do well, right? So that's why I say ADP. And Tannehill, you're like the first guy that I've heard, aside from myself, that's a Tannehill fan. I love the guy. I made a trade to acquire him late last season in my full IDP dynasty team, and I have Deshaun Watson was my starting quarterback, and he was give or take, but towards the end of the season, I started Tannehill over Watson, and he propelled me right to the championship game where my absolutely stud defense took home the championship.
They pull it out.
Nice.
Congratulations. All right, I'll give you my 3 sleepers and see what you think about them. I have Chase Edmonds, who is the running back playing in committee with Kenyon Drake in Arizona. He had that one game last season where out of nowhere he went off for like 40 points, and he didn't really do it again. I believe his ADP is around, if I remember correctly, it's 10th-ish. It's late round. And I think Kenyon Drake has yet to prove he can really have a full workload. And especially with a young quarterback, they're going to be relying on their running backs more so than a lot of other teams are. So I think Chase Edmonds, we've seen him break out last season. So I think if he's given the chance by Kingsbury, I think he can really make his move. Then I have Marlon Mack, who's going to be playing in committee in Indianapolis with Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor. I think before they drafted Jonathan Taylor, I think a lot of people agreed he was at least an RB2, if not a lower end RB1. I think people got scared off when Jonathan Taylor was getting drafted. But Mack had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, had a good amount of touchdowns. I think he'll still get his touches. And then I think even if they're trying to play Jonathan Taylor maybe a bit slower, I think he'll definitely get at least half the shares of touches behind Taylor. And then for my last one, I have a quarterback. I have Teddy Bridgewater. I think Bridgewater, he's going into a system where he has a decent receiving core. He has a new coach, the coach coming out of Baylor, right? And then he has CMC there to fall back on if he needs it. So I think Bridgewater has a really, really good supporting cast, and we saw Bridgewater. He was in New Orleans, and he was playing well while Drew Brees was out. And while Drew Brees was playing, he was sitting behind Drew Brees, kind of studying, kind of having like a Jimmy Garoppolo type season. So I think Bridgewater is a huge candidate to be taken and have a really, really good season.
I agree with you. And real quick, I can give you my thoughts on each one if you'd like, Cameron. Well, Chase Edmonds, I love that one. I'm a big Kenyon Drake guy as it stands now. I just drafted. I'm in a what is it? It's the Ryder Bowl. It's like the UK versus the United States, and it's a slow draft, and I'm still drafting. And I drafted Drake in the third round, right? And in terms of Chase, what you said was perfect. I couldn't have said it any better. Given the opportunity, Chase can flourish. He can shine, and we've only seen half of a good season from Drake, and it was last year when he came over to Arizona, right? And but he was phenomenal in his last 8 or 9 games. And I could see an instance where Chase and Drake they're almost in a committee to start the season. Let's see who does what. And I might get roasted and raked over the coals for saying that. And that all has to do with where Drake is being drafted. People are drafting him as a top 15 back. So because of that, nobody wants to hear someone like me say, well, he might be in a committee. Well, we're allowed to have our own opinions. I can have my own thought process, right? Doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong, or I'm wrong and you're right. And when it comes to Marlon Mack, in that same Ryder Bowl draft I just mentioned, I just drafted Mack in like the 12th round. It's absolutely crazy where I was able to draft him. And guess what? Around the turn in the 13th, Kerryon Johnson is sitting there, and I'm thinking about drafting him in the 13th round. So hopefully no one that's in the draft with me is going to see this, but I love the Matt call. And you know why? Because in terms of these rookies like Clyde Edwards and even Jonathan Taylor, we literally don't know anything yet. Right? I think it was a week after the NFL draft in April. I was so beside myself with people. They were Aaron Jones. He's a bum now since they drafted A.J. Dillon. Marlon Mack is a bum now since they drafted Jonathan Taylor. And look, we don't know anything. We don't know how this stuff is going to shake out. So I don't want to say until told otherwise, because we've been told till we're blue in the face, until I've seen it with my own eyes, that's the way the depth chart is going to work out. I'm still drafting these guys, and I'm still rolling with a guy like Mack, right? When in terms of Teddy Bridgewater, I love that call. His ADP is like 149, so 150. We're talking basically he's free. You're getting a quarterback for free.
Right.
And I would draft him on merit alone, just for the simple fact that he has the best running back in the world behind him. The best running back in the world is backing him up. So why would you not want a piece of Teddy Bridgewater?
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And we sort of mentioned this earlier, or we're hinting at it. I guess the next thing we're looking at is overrated players or overvalued players in the draft. So is there a single guy or a couple of guys that you're looking at that are overvalued?
I can see the look on your face. You're ready to go in.
This gets me going, and I didn't even really have to take any notes, right? So you guys sent me the screenshot of what we wanted to talk about, and I made some notes, a couple highlights. As I said in the opening, people know me as a madman, and I take notes like a serial killer. Some people have said, which is it's just fantasy sports. So in terms of overvalued players, I hate to keep leaning on this, but I've written about everything under the sun. So I wrote about an article that I got a lot of heat for, but it was great because it opened up the door to a lot of honest and serious conversations, where I mentioned Lamar Jackson, number one, right? He's not so much overrated, but overhyped. And because of his draft stock and his ADP, to me, he has little to no trade value. And follow me here for a second. So I'll ask both of you guys. So Max, you own Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a package or a deal under the sun that you would accept for him right now if he was your quarterback one?
Probably not.
Okay, so you own him. There's nothing you'd give up to trade him away. And in turn, Cameron, you want to acquire Lamar Jackson, and you just heard Max say there's not really much that he's going to give up. So in turn, Cameron, you have to give your entire roster to Max for Lamar Jackson. So do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
He has little to no value. If you own him, Max owns him. Well, he's my guy. He's my quarterback one, and I'm rolling with him. And a guy like you, Cam, you want to acquire him, there's nothing you can do or say to acquire him. So he has, to me, that equals he has little to no value, right? So when we come to being overvalued, I wouldn't say overvalued. He really has no value, and he's being overhyped as the next as Jesus H on football cleats wearing purple in Baltimore. And my second guy, without a doubt, I mean, and I would imagine you guys would agree with me, is Clyde Edwards in Kansas City. It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable what people are willing to do to move into a spot to draft Clyde Edwards. And it's amazing what people are doing once they own him, and what they're getting in return for him, or what you're willing to give up for him. And again, not saying Clyde Edwards is an awesome running back. I wasn't able to watch a lot of him here. I'm in Big Ten country. I don't see a lot of SEC games. He did play in the national championship game. The kid is a stud, let's be honest, right? But again, we haven't seen a thing. I think it reached its peak, like its all-time high when D. Will opted out, and that was his decision to make. And so Kansas City was left with DeAndre Washington, I believe, who they picked up from the Raiders at the time. Yeah. So I get all the excitement in terms of Clyde Edwards, but me personally, I'm going to hold my horses on him for now, and that might come back to burn me, but it might come back to make me look like a genius, and my teams will be, intact and stronger for it. But that's the risk that we play when we're fully involved with fantasy football and dynasty football.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
I've always been, I don't know if this is a fault or a benefit or maybe neither, but I've always been wary about drafting rookies just because they're very unproven. I like to be a little bit safer with my draft and kind of take the people. And I'm actually very similar in the daily fantasy sports and like in DraftKings, where a lot of times my rosters are looking a lot more like moderately expensive players, and then maybe a little bit of a reach, a little bit of a sleeper, rather than a lot of studs and then a lot of sleepers. And I think a lot of times it helps me out because there's always that one rookie who pops off out of nowhere and no one's expecting it. And he's amazing. And if you got him in the 15th round, you're guaranteed to do well. But a lot of these rookies are either average and not worth where they were picked, or they don't play well their first season. And it's really more about guessing right rather than trying to predict who the rookie that would pop off is. Because a lot of those rookies who have those insane seasons, it's more of a shot in the dark than anything else. So I think people trying to act like Jonathan Taylor or Edward Helaire is going to be the next Barry Sanders it's strange to me because they're great, but you don't know what they're like in the NFL yet.
And here's the thing, I heard this last night on a roundtable broadcast I was on, and I hate to not be able to credit the guy because it was fantastic, but he said, for us fantasy football players, we can literally put a guy on the moon, right? If if 1,000 accounts or 100 accounts, whatever, start talking about a guy and hyping him up, boom, he shoots to the top of draft boards, ADP, and we've taken that guy and we've put him on the moon, if that makes any sense. And I couldn't have said it better myself. So we as a fantasy football community have collectively put Clyde Edwards on the moon. And will it be well warranted? I don't know.
Right. That's true. So I guess a guy that I'm looking at, who I think is overvalued, and I think he's a really, really talented player. I'm talking about Dalvin Cook. He's a first round guy, maybe even a top 5 guy, but he really hasn't finished out a full season. Like, I'm worried about the injuries. Maybe I have, memories of David Johnson drafting him first, but I'm really wary to spend a first round pick on a guy who hasn't proven that he can stay healthy.
I'm not a fan of Cook, and it has nothing to do with what he has done or not done on the field. I'm not into that attitude that he had when I'm sitting out. I want you to pay me. I'm sitting out. Who cares? I want my money. Listen, guy, you haven't really done much. You've struggled to, stay healthy. You blew out your knee. You had one, I should have researched this. I mean, I didn't know ahead of time, but Dalvin Cook, he had a fantastic 2019 season. I'm not sure. I don't think he missed many, if at all, games, right? But to put your team in a position like that, the front office and even the guys that you go to war with on the field, to put them in a position like that where they have to choose sides between management and my boy Dalvin Cook, right? To put them in a position like that, it's not fair, and I don't like that kind of behavior. And just for that fact alone, I'm not going to draft him, because ultimately, when we're playing fantasy football, we're here, the three of us, Saturday night at 9:30, laughing and chatting it up about fantasy football. It's fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's interesting, right? And I don't always make my decisions based on numbers and fact. I base my decisions sometimes on gut feeling, or, I love the Cincinnati Bengals helmet, so I want to draft Mixon. I'm allowed to do that. That's the beauty of fantasy football, right? We are the general manager of our own little team. And as the general manager of my team, I don't want to own Cook because I think he's an asshole. He's a jerk. And I don't want, sorry to swear, I just don't want that hassle on my team. Same as, let's say, Amari Cooper. The guy has all the talent in the world, but it's a hassle starting him. Is he going to play? If he does play, is he going to finish the game? So I don't want any of those question marks on my team. So Dalvin Cook, I respect you, Max, in your opinion, but I don't like him, and I'm not going to own him.
Yeah. That's a really interesting take, and one that I don't really hear very often, is people saying, he's a great player, but the question marks aren't even on, they are on his health, obviously, but there are also question marks on, is one day he's going to wake up and be like, I'm grumpy, I'm not going to play today,
Yeah. And to me, it has everything to do with me just being a fan of football, me being a fan of all sports, right? So when I build my fantasy football team, those are guys that I like to draft, that I can root for, that I can watch on Sunday, that I can watch on Monday night or Thursday night football. Broken down to its simplest form, I'm a fan of the guys that I draft. I'm not a fan of Cook. I'm not a fan of Cooper. So why would I want them on my team? My long-term outlook on my fantasy football season, having fun and being in the mix and being able to, ham it up with you guys, is worth more to me than stressing over a running back that I drafted 3rd overall and hoping he plays this week. No, I'd rather have fun and be able to, chat with you guys, write fun articles, and do all that. I don't want to, have someone on my team that I'm completely disgusted with or hate.
I took the same approach with baseball. Like, I didn't take any Astros this year.
They're cheaters. I fully support Joe Kelly and what he did, and and his suspension. Absolutely, and his that meme.
My the player I have, my overrated / overvalued player is this one. I feel like it's going to be a bit of an iffy one. I have Alvin Kamara as my overrated player. I think there's some personal vendetta in this one because I had him last year, and last year he was not amazing. Because 2 years ago he was insane,
Fantastic.
just a machine.
A 15th rounder, as you put it
Yeah,
prior in the broadcast, came out of nowhere. Won how many leagues that season?
Yeah.
exactly. And then last year I had a pretty decent pick. I think I was fourth or fifth. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get him this year. I'm gonna get him. I got Kamara, and he's one of those players kind of similar to what you're talking about with Jackson, where I have him and he's giving me like sometimes he'd give me like 22, but a lot of times I'd be getting like 8 or 9 points from Kamara. And he's one of those guys where I'm like, I can't trade him. Like I'm gonna need a lot for Kamara, even though he's not giving me a lot. And other people are kind of sitting there saying, well, why would I want him? I have decent running backs who are being consistent with me. And I think Alvin Kamara is one of those. I'm worried that he had one of those seasons where he was insane for one season, and then now we're seeing what he actually is, which is a good running back, but is he an early first rounder or even a first rounder at all? So I'm wary, and obviously I think he'll play well. I think there are going to be in a lot of leagues, he'll be a solid starter, and it'll be someone who you can say, all right, I'll get okay points from this week. But I don't know if he's going to be worth that really early first round or even late first round pick that a lot of people are giving him.
Well, well said, first of all. And second, there's a lot to digest with what you said, and the gears in my mind are turning. So he burst onto the season in his rookie year, and last year was his sophomore season, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Right.
So let's say, for the sake of the argument here, that his first season, it was a whirlwind. It was amazing, and he even was like, "Oh my God, I'm playing out of my mind. Everything's clicking." And then last season, he showed let's say last season he showed what his floor is, which is a pretty damn good floor
It's a decent floor,
for a professional running back. So he burst onto the scene, right? And last year was his floor, and in between last season and what we're going to see this season was his learning curve, right? He stumbled a little bit. He wasn't hitting on all cylinders, not like his rookie season. And he's going to be able to put it all together this coming season in 2020 and be the running back we all think he can be, which I personally think he's a star. And last season was more of an outlier. It was a learning curve, let's say, because I've watched a lot of Alvin Kamara on tape because I've never owned Kamara, but he still intrigues me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's interesting. There's something about him. And not to be rude to you, Cameron, I don't agree with you when you say maybe he's just going to be an okay quarterback. This kid is special. He does things that not a lot of people on earth, let alone football players, can do. I love the pass catching and the way he can swing, out or on a halfback dive, let's say, right up. He can go between the tackles. He can take a ball on the outside on a wheel route for 90 yards for a touchdown. So I firmly am on board with a Kamara comeback season, if you want to call it that, because as it stands now, he's a top 5 pick. So it's either in terms of him, you're either in or you're out. You don't say, well, I don't know about Kamara, but I'm going to draft him 4th overall. You're either in or you're out. And to me, I'm all in with Alvin this season.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
He's definitely he's very viable, and there's definitely emotional attachment to this one because he really made me kind of annoyed last season. But it's kind of hard to predict that one.
So here's the thing. I want to tell you something from experience real quick. In all the years I've been playing fantasy football, I'm going to ask you, Cameron, ride it out. Ride that wave of emotion. Draft him again this year. No questions asked. you get the second, third overall pick, draft Kamara, and ride it out for worse or for better. Marry the guy. I'm being honest. I'm being serious with you. In terms of fantasy football, marry the guy, go all in with him, and ride that wave of emotion. To me, that's what fantasy football is all about.
Yeah.
Grab him, and then you're either going to live or you're going to die with him. You're going to have like the greatest success story of all time with Kamara, or it's just going to fade away and you're going to be able to draft another guy in 10 years from now and tell the same story, but fill in the blank with another guy. Draft him and ride it out, buddy.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, speaking of Kamara 2 years ago, obviously a great breakout player that year. You got anyone this year who you're looking at as a breakout candidate?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a few guys. Number one, talk about wanting to marry someone, DK Metcalf in Seattle. The guy is fantastic. He coming into the draft during his rookie season, we all saw the picture of him. He looked like a superhero. He was in the gym, all jacked up and everything. But he fell. I think he was drafted in the third round, maybe 32nd overall to Seattle. And then finally, they gave him some playing time. And in the phone call, and hopefully you guys have seen it, on draft day, he's at home on the couch. I think Dan something is the owner in Seattle. He goes, hey, let's put on Coach Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll says, hey, you're gonna be in Seattle and you're gonna have Russell Wilson throwing you footballs. And then he was fantastic last year with the limited amount of playing time that he received. And I say limited because he started off slow, and then when they got him in game action, he was fantastic. He's a big guy. He's strong. He can pull that ball away from you, and he doesn't care. He'll run over your grandma to get in that end zone. And that's that killer instinct that I love. So coming into the season, looking at his ADP, I think I have it written down at like 46, so anywhere between like late fourth to early fifth round. And that's perfect for, a breakout candidate. He's not, I'm not going out on a limb and saying, oh, I got a guy who's, being drafted in the 19th, 20th round who's going to break out. I would look silly, and you can't call a breakout guy, a 10th overall guy. So DK Metcalf is in that perfect, he's just lying in wait, right? Where we're going to draft him in the fourth or fifth round, our second wide receiver, our team's wide receiver too, and he's just going to shoot to the top. And to me in Seattle, it's DK, and it's not even close, so you get hounded and bit, Tyler Lockett truthers. You're like, oh my, it's DK Metcalf to me in Seattle. And my second guy, which this guy's been popular, people have talked about him, but things have kind of cooled off with all the Clyde Edwards talk and the rookie stuff. Ronald Johnson in Tampa Bay, Rojo, baby, in Tampa Bay. So everyone was like, they wanted to stay away from him, about a month or so. Why you would draft, in April or May is beyond me. A rookie draft, sure, but people were shying away from him because Keyshawn Vaughn was in town. But Keyshawn Vaughn hasn't stepped on the field once because I believe he's been on the COVID IR exempt list. Don't know if he's sick or not, but he hasn't played. He hasn't practiced. And even if he does, it's still Rojo's backfield. And I will die on that hill. I firmly believe Rojo is going to be a fantastic running back this year. We all know Tom Brady is the quarterback there. You got Gronk. You got two of the best wide receivers in football with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin there. So Rojo he's in a good spot. And people will say, I've had that argument with people where I can't stand when people say, oh, there's too many mouths to feed. It's lazy. It's cliche. It's just, people say that in passing. And in Tampa Bay, there are a lot of people there who need the ball on a regular basis to put up points and numbers for us. But I think that's perfect for a guy like Rojo, who they stretch the field out with Evans and Godwin and Gronk. I mean, good luck stacking the box with these guys. Either way, you're either going to live and die with stacking the box or not. And long term, I don't think people are going to blitz a lot on Tampa Bay. So everything's going to be wide open for Rojo. And he only needs 10, 12, maybe 15 targets. I'm not even going to say carries, targets and touches a game. 12 targets and touches a game, 100 yards and a touchdown. I'm saying 100 overall yards, both,
Right.
receiving and rushing yards. So I love Rojo and I love DK in Seattle, boys.
Nice.
I like both those picks.
Yeah,
I
I
think
like him.
Ronald Jones, I was looking at pretty heavily when I was doing a mock draft last night. Ronald Jones was falling into not late rounds, but mid to late rounds. And he doesn't have a ton of that competition because Keyshawn Vaughn, he's a great player, but it's not going to be hard to kind of overtake him if Keyshawn Vaughn isn't showing out. And then when Ronald Jones had that kind of iffy poor season last year, when a lot of people thought he was gonna pop off, it means he's fallen a bit later this time. And I think with that new stacked offense and with the more opportunities he's gonna be given, I think he's going to be a fantastic player and a huge breakout candidate.
Shout out to Rojo. We follow each other on Twitter.
Do you really?
No way.
Big. That's a pretty big flex right there.
Yeah, so for me, I know Cameron mentioned earlier he doesn't like drafting rookies. And this is sort of like a guy you can get super, super late, almost for free. Joshua Kelly for the Chargers. I just feel like Melvin Gordon leaving. I mean, they've obviously got Eckler there, but I feel like Eckler's not going to be able to take the entire workload, and Eckler's not necessarily a goal line guy. So I feel like a guy like Kelly, you can get a little later on, get you some touchdowns, and he could potentially break out. And then my other guy sort of broke out a little bit last year, definitely improved big time. DJ Chark out of Jacksonville.
Good one.
I just feel like he's only going to get better. Minshew, I feel like, is only going to get better. And I feel like he can really take that step forward and maybe push top 15, top 10. So, yeah, those are my two guys.
I failed to mention Keyshawn Vaughn and I follow each other on Twitter too.
Oh, man.
You're playing them against each other.
I got the whole Buccaneers backfield.
Yeah.
That's impressive, actually. Hey,
Nice.
next step is Brady.
He's not verified yet, if I'm not mistaken, because
okay.
I believe we went back and forth like in a thread. I think that's what it's called, and he followed me. I followed him back, and I looked, and that's I dug deep, and that really is his. He's yet to be verified yet. So shout out to Keyshawn. I know it's coming, man. You get the little check mark.
Nice.
My breakout candidates are, first up, I have AJ Brown, the Titans receiver. I remember he started off kind of slow last season, and then towards the end, I think last year was his rookie season,
Correct.
if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
he just went off. Tannehill was obviously looking to him when he wasn't handing it off to Henry. And AJ Brown was the evident wide receiver one for that team. And I think with the balance between running and passing, with the Derrick Henry being a very, very intense running threat, and them not being able to focus too heavily on the passing game with that guy looking at him, AJ Brown, I think, is a huge candidate to go off for another big season. And I think we've already seen what he can do, especially later in last season. I think AJ Brown is a huge, huge candidate for a breakout season. My other guy I have going is Marquise Brown, the Ravens receiver. I think he has. I think the Ravens roster in general is very, very, very talented. And I think Marquise Brown could do a very, very good job of being that deep threat that Lamar Jackson is always looking for. I remember I started him because I forget why, but I didn't want to start him that week, but I had to. And it was like the fourth week of the season when he went for like 3 touchdowns and like 200 receiving yards. And watching that game, it was just different. He was a little bit inconsistent last season, with the Ravens still kind of figuring out that offense, that balance between the Lamar Jackson running game and the Lamar Jackson passing game, and then also where that fits the running backs in. But I think Marquise Brown has cemented himself into that organization. And I think since Lamar Jackson probably has a little bit more trust, a little bit more chemistry now with his receiving core, I think Marquise Brown could be a huge breakout candidate too.
I love that one. That's fantastic.
Nice.
I just made a trade for I received Brown and Hardman in a deal during my my draft in that IDP PPR dynasty league I was telling you about, and all I had to do was trade some picks, and I don't know, I'll get back to you what the other portion was, but I got back Brown and Hardman, and I couldn't be more ecstatic because I I own CMC too, so it's just but listen, I have, like I said, I told you I have Watson, CMC, and Devontae Adams. I mean, that was it on offense. I let my defense carry me in that league. So now I've started to put offensive pieces together, and my defense has only gotten stronger in the draft. I had pick 12 and then 13, and I didn't even care about offense. I drafted Chase Young and Patrick Queen with those two picks. So team's looking strong this season.
That is a good looking team.
Yeah.
I'll send remind me when we're done. I'll send you some screenshots of both my offense and my defense. It's
fantastic.
It's unbelievable.
And you mentioned the IDP, and if you could, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because we have never done one. I don't know if you've done one, Cam.
I've never done one of those.
Individual defensive player. I feel like it'd be a really fun thing to do. I've just never done it. I just normally just do normal ESPN leagues. But yeah, you do a lot of cheat sheets for the IDP. I know you sent me some. But yeah, what's IDP like?
Well, it's fantastic. I don't want to keep you here all night because that really gets the juices flowing. I love IDP. I mean, I've long been carrying the IDP flag along with a couple other guys. I'm not going to say I'm leading the charge because I'm happy to be lumped in with a group of guys that love IDP. And as you said, it's individual defensive player. And there's some leagues that are starting to, dip their toes in there while you have, your full offense. And then you'll have a couple IDP flex guys where you can, grab a couple linebackers or a safety. And to me, that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to disparage anybody who wants to get into, rostering some defensive players, let's say, but, sorry about that for a second, I believe. So I don't want to disparage people when they want to get into IDP, but the only way for me to play is just a full-blown defense. 3 linebackers, 2 safeties, 2 cornerbacks, a defensive tackle, 2 DNs, and go from there. It brings another form of excitement to the game where you're not just watching the quarterbacks and the running backs per week. You're watching the guys in the trenches like Cameron Hayward in Pittsburgh, or Mike Purcell, defensive tackle in Denver. You're watching these guys just go nuts, and linebackers and tackles, and they're flying around. It's just fantastic. Aside from dynasty baseball, where I can roster like 30 prospects and minor league guys, this IDP roster I play in is the most fun I've ever had playing any sort of fantasy sports. So I implore you guys, get involved, get into it. I'm not going to, put you down or make fun. If you want to just maybe get a couple defensive flex spots to start, but maybe try and transition long-term to a full-blown IDP league. It's fantastic.
No, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Like a lot of fun.
Yeah, you mentioned you got Chase Young. I mean, I'm a Washington fan, so that'd be super cool to get.
I also own Darius Leonard in that league too. He's the consensus number 1 overall IDP guy. They call him the Maniac. I mean, he's scary. He's like Michael Myers on the field. That guy in Halloween with the. I mean, he's just he's unbelievable.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about fantasy. I guess we can sort of transition. Just a quick snippet. Do you have a Super Bowl pick? I know it's super early. A lot can change. I know you're probably a Lions guy.
Yeah.
They have a shot, but you gotta pick.
Well, jokingly, about I would say 2 months ago, kiddingly, I said, well, I think my Super Bowl is going to be the Lions versus the New York Jets. And people were laughing. It's picked up steam now, where every time I see, one of those questions on Twitter, I say, the Jets and the Lions. So
right.
I'm not going back now. I would look like a dummy. So the Lions and the Jets.
Yes,
it's one of those situations where, in every regular everyday life, people, they cut out a car that they want and they put it on a board, or like manifest your destiny.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm saying it out loud, and I'm putting it out there in the world.
Into the
the
universe.
Jets will play the Lions in the Super Bowl.
I respect the grind that you're doing. Hey, if they win the Super Bowl this year, you're gonna have to get a ring, right?
Absolutely.
You're gonna have to.
I'm gonna have to spend some time going back through all these videos and editing, cutting them up, and screenshotting my comments on Twitter. But the Lions win the Super Bowl, that would be the least of my worries.
That's true. If I had my Super Bowl pick, it's gonna be kind of hard for me to not choose a rematch of last season, just because both of those teams seem so dominant in their conferences. So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I think we're gonna assume it's not the Niners or the Chiefs, because that's boring. I think I'm gonna go Ravens, and then I'm gonna go Saints.
Oh my! You stole mine, Cameron.
The Saints.
The Saints are equally as boring. Hate to break the news.
They're so boring. The problem with the Saints is they have betrayed me so often. Last year, they were my pick to go to the Super Bowl and lose to the Chiefs, and they went out in the first round. And they did that like 2 years ago as well. And they always betray me whenever I pick them. And when I don't pick them, they do well. So this season, I'm just going to stick by them. No, I'm going to stick by them. Like just like you. I've had in the last 2 seasons to do well. Just like your advice on Alvin Kamara. I'm going to stick by the Saints. I'm going to believe in them this time. And if Drew Brees messes this up for me again, I'm going to nothing, I guess. I have no power. But
yeah,
I have no power. That like the Lord of the Rings theme. Your magic has no power here.
Well, I hope it has power. Evidently not.
I mean, that's sort of what I was going to go with, but I'll change it up just to be different. I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast. I'm actually a big fan of the Bills this year. With Josh Allen getting better, Stephon Diggs coming in. I mean, that defense. So, I'll take the Bills. I'll stick with it. I know Cameron was giving me a lot of crap.
I'm a Patriots fan. So there's not much.
That's true.
You gotta hate the Bills. I mean, the Bills' defense is insane. There's no question about that. Oh, yeah. I'm worried about picking an unproven quarterback to go to the Super Bowl.
It's true.
Here's the thing, real quick. A defense like Buffalo, they can carry that team and that franchise, given the fact that they play in Buffalo. So half their games are in Buffalo, and they play 8 away and 8 home. So I would say 6 of their 8 home games are going to be in cold. It's going to be cold. It's going to be snowy. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. And a defense like that has a huge helping hand.
Totally agree. So one thing we do at the end of podcasts, usually we have a little segment, random rankings you didn't know you needed. So our little segment today is the top 5 athletes born in August. I was looking at this. There's actually some pretty decent guys.
It's a nice lineup.
So my number 5 guy, Wilt Chamberlain.
Stud.
Obviously stud. Yeah. Number 4, Magic. I got a lot of basketball players on here.
Yeah, his was Friday, 61.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good for Magic.
3rd,
Michigan State guy. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. Tom Brady. I know Cameron has a little vendetta against Brady.
I thought you were going to say Tom Brady. Cameron has a little. What do they call that? Like a what do they call that? Like not a memorial, but
in memoriam.
Where you have candles and like a lock of his hair and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be against it. I would now. He's rest in peace, Tom Brady.
Okay. My number 2 guy, we talked about him earlier, best player on the planet, Mike Trout. He's an August guy. And number 1, rest in peace, Kobe.
Yeah.
When was his birthday? A few days ago.
I'm gonna look it up right now. It was pretty recently, yeah.
Oh, real quick, it's not off subject, but I saw really right before we went live, but just looking for your message and the link, right? And someone, I think it was like some 16-year-old kid on his Twitter said, I would take Curry in Golden State over Kobe any day. And he listed off like 15 or 16 different stats where Curry was better than Kobe. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
right? And then I went in the comments section, and this kid was absolutely torn apart. Like I'm saying, a lot of it wasn't nice, and it wasn't PG.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, they're very. I feel bad. I kind of almost want to agree with him. I'm being honest here. That's a conversation for a different time.
I'm going to dissociate myself with you in this podcast then, because you're going to get eaten alive, man.
I understand what I'm putting myself up for. Okay, I understand what I just said.
You are a big Curry guy, though.
But it depends. It depends on the era we're playing in. If we're playing in Kobe's era, I take Kobe. If we're playing in the now, I take Curry. No, I take Curry. It's a different.
But I understand what you're saying, but that's
different play styles.
I understand what you're saying, but that's a never-ending argument, right?
No, it is. There's an impossible decision there. Yeah. I'll give you my August birthday list. First up is an honorable mention. Edgerrin James is my honorable mention. Great running back. My mom loves him. Not sure why.
How does your mom know?
What? She always wants to take him in fantasy football, and I need to remind her every year that he doesn't play anymore.
He retired 20 years ago, Mom.
Yeah, it's strange. She likes Edgerrin James. Number 5, I have Trout. There's less of an emotional connection to Trout than there is anyone else. 4, I have Brady. If you asked me last year, Brady's the number 1, but stuff has happened.
He hurt your feelings, yeah.
He did hurt my feelings, and there was no warning to.
Show me on this doll where Tom Brady hurt you, Cameron.
Everywhere. Everywhere. Number 3, I have Kobe. R.I.P. One of the all-time greats. Number 2, I have Wilt, because I think Wilt gets disrespected a lot. People forget that he scored 100 in one game.
And how many women has he ran through? That's public record, I think. Thousands, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Like Gene Simmons from Kiss.
He also, I remember hearing stories of Wilt where he'd go into a building one day, he'd be like, I'm bored of scoring 60 a game. I'm just going to go for the league lead in assists. And then he'd go in and he'd drop like 30 assists a game. He just win assists that year. And then at the top, I have Magic. I'm a big Larry Bird guy, and they were pretty good friends. Magic is funny. I think watching interviews with him, usually watching him do commentary is always entertaining / informative. So you gotta love Magic. Then that's my top 5 plus Edgerrin James.
Fun fact about Magic: he buys Starbucks coffees. Not the actual physical coffee, but he bid the businesses. He just buys them.
He just owns franchises.
He owns franchises, storefronts.
Just such an interesting business to go into. I wonder what his inspiration behind that was.
I don't know.
Money. It's got to be lucrative. People love Starbucks coffee.
I've always been more of a Dunkin' Donuts
He
guy.
is a big Dunkin' guy.
A big Dunkin' guy.
And then I guess one more thing, if you're up for it, we like to talk about music on this podcast. Cameron specifically is really big into music. So has there been anything recently that you've been really into music-wise? I don't know if you listen to a lot of music.
Yeah. When in my car, I have Sirius satellite radio. So when I'm in my car, it's Howard Stern 24/7 for me, right?
Okay.
Even like when we get off this broadcast, I'm sitting in front of my computer. I listen to Howard Stern old YouTube clips with Artie and Eric the Midget. Google them if you don't know that.
Yeah.
But every
Okay.
once in a while, I'll sync up my phone to my car, and I just run through kind of the newer stuff. I've been listening to a lot of Eminem's Music to Be Murdered By is pretty cool, and in
Good
turn,
album.
it's I got into some Juice WRLD, his newest album. Legends Never Die, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I've had, I think it's called Righteous is the song. I've had that on heavy rotation recently. And it's just, knowing that he died and how he died and the music, his posthumously, or however you say it, album. A lot of these songs were, he was talking about doing prescription pills and, drinking codeine. And if I'm not mistaken, that's how he died. So it's just, it's really weird. You get in a weird place when you're listening to it, knowing, it's kind of like if I only, knowing what I know now. Well, we know now what happened. And then he's here, telling us about it. And I've also gotten into some, Joyner Lucas is fantastic. I just read that his album Isis went platinum last week, and again in turn it turned me on to Logic, and Under Pressure is a good song. It's like 12 minutes long. That's a good jam. So
song.
That's where I'm at with what I've been listening to in my music.
Look
up Joyner Lucas Lotto. That's one of my favorite songs right now.
Lotto?
All right.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'll look into it.
We're definitely big Logic fans here as well. We love
his newer album is fantastic.
So good. But my guy, he just released an album. My guy's Amine. I think his album was called Limbo. And I think this really should be his sort of breakthrough album because he's lesser known. He's not one of the big guys, but this album is just ridiculous. I liked, almost all of it. Limbo. I'm more into the like R&B rap, jazzy sort of rap, and that's what this guy does. So I really liked his new album.
Yeah, you don't strike me as a F the police kind of guy.
the
Me?
Snoop Dogg style.
Yeah.
My recommendation is I've been on a huge Kid Cudi tear recently. His first two albums, Man on the Moon 1 and 2, are some of the best albums I've ever heard. If you want to talk about like that weird, like hypnotic,
psychedelic-ish,
of hip hop, you gotta listen to those two albums. I kind of like his older stuff more so than his newer stuff. His newer stuff it goes from being it becomes a lot more abstract as it goes on. And it's like, that's obviously some people like that, and not this and that style of music. It's a little bit too abstract for me. But I think Man on the Moon 1 and 2 are both like really good mixes of like abstract along with kind of like the same standard, like it still sounds good. And he does a really cool mix of melodic stuff, and he infuses rock and hip hop really well. If you're trying to get into him, obviously you guys probably know the Pursuit of Happiness and Day and Night. Those are both Kid Cudi off of his first album. Erase Me has Kanye West, and that's a fantastic song. And then Mr. Rager is it's really trippy. You gotta listen to the words, and the music video is also insane.
I'll write it down right now.
Yeah, Mr. Rager and Erase Me both come off of Man on the Moon too. So Kid Cudi is fantastic.
Real quick, Cameron, while you mentioned Kid Cudi, what do you think about him and Eminem's recent collaboration, The Adventures of Moon Man and Slim?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
I'm hoping that there'll be a whole full-blown collaboration album.
Loved that song, and I know Max didn't like it too much. I have a few other friends who, whenever I talked to, didn't like it. It seemed like a lot of people weren't huge fans of it. I loved it. The lyricism I thought was insane, and the beat was a bit simplistic, but like the way they used it, like I feel like the beat was simplistic because they wanted you to be listening to the words more so. And they even say that like, y'all don't listen to the words in the song. I think that was the Kid Cudi verse. So I thought it was a great song. I really hope they become like a full-on collaboration duo. I don't know if you listened to his collaboration album with Kanye West, Kids See Ghosts. Kids See Ghosts, I think, is I think it's probably a top 10, 15 album of all time, in terms of hip hop. And if that is any indicator of how well he'll do with Eminem, I would love to see them together.
Yeah.
You and me both.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like the lyrics were really good. I'll give them that, but I don't know. The beat was just a little too simplistic for my taste. I really like I played the drums in high school, so I really focus on the beat when I'm listening to music. But you know, they're both really talented, and I think if they collabed, it'd be a really, really great experience for both of them.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that sort of wraps it up. We really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was a really cool.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's normally one of those unexpected things because again, I'm not trying to be. I don't want to be that guy, but you know, I'm doing a podcast almost every like guest spots, and you know, because that's just how the community is. You know, it's very, very supportive. Everyone wants to work with one another. So, you know, almost every day or every night, you know, I'm with somebody else, you know, doing a collaboration or, you know, just like a guest spot or even on radio shows in Denver and here locally in Detroit. And I got to say, I'm surprised. Not surprised, but this was fantastic. And I appreciate the the creativity was just, it was never stifled, right? You know, you gave me, you know, we had full reign and we can, you know, say whatever we wanted. There wasn't like a rigid schedule, right? Because we've all done stuff like that before where it just sucks the fun and the spontaneity out of it. And it's not fun. I would have probably shown myself out 10, 15 minutes in, but thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. You send me a message and I'm there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
All right. Thank you guys.